Hello, Laziali all over the world. Welcome to another episode of Lazio Lounge. It's not a great Monday to be a Lazio fan. And the worst thing about this is I cannot even blame the ref for this unbelievable defeat. Lazio losing 5-0 to Bologna. Alasdair McKenzie, we knew it was a tough game, right? Bologna is, and we said it last week, it's playing really good football. At home, they're pretty much unbeatable. And the Lazio was coming off a difficult game in Europe on Thursday. So we didn't have that much time to recover, etc. But my God, losing 5-0 like this. The first shot on target Lazio had was when we were already down 3-0 and Zaccagni hit the post. In the first half, we had ball possession but didn't create that much. This is not acceptable. You can lose against Bologna and you could see it coming, but not like this, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think unacceptable is the word, isn't it? It's like you say, it's one thing to expect a difficult game in Bologna. It's another thing to completely capitulate like that. And it's hard really to understand how the team can let things unravel quite to that level, because I'm sure today we'll end up going back over some of the themes we've addressed recently in terms of injuries and tiredness and the stretching of the squad, let's say. But there is no excuse. There is no way that you can find an answer to how Lazio go and lose 5-0 in Bologna, because I would have accepted defeat if we'd been able to see something of the team there, because, like you say, Bologna in great form, and it's a top four race, whatever. They're right up there. But it was like watching a team top of the table playing Monza or something. It was embarrassing, really.
Well, Monza nearly beat the Inter away, so
That's a terrible example, actually. Yeah, at least Monza got a 3-2 out of that.
Yeah. By the way, thanks Dylan Mota. I hope the pronunciation this time is correct, for becoming an Aquilotto, a new member of our Patreon page. Thank you very much, especially in these days. Yeah. It's incredible. So thanks again to all our Patreon for your support. We massively appreciate this. You talk about the players, Alison, but we have to talk about Marco Baroni. Now, big surprise seeing Tati and Nuno Tavares starting on Thursday. I thought we didn't need them to start. And if on Wednesday in the press conference you say Castellano has no more than 20 minutes and then he plays 65 minutes on Thursday, that doesn't make sense to me. And the worst thing is they weren't able to play yesterday. That was, and we mentioned it, more difficult game to play, right? The best decision would have been Tati could play the last 20 minutes on Thursday and start against Bologna. That is a more complicated game rather than the opposite way. And we have to blame Baroni for that. Tati was on the bench but wasn't able to play. Nuno Tavares didn't play. Dele Bashiru got injured again. He wasn't even on the bench on yesterday. These are terrible mistakes from a manager. In a very difficult situation, you didn't have that much time. You should have never risked key players like that in a game that, we could have won even without them, or at least get a draw without them.
Yeah, I mean, I think Baroni is now coming under more pressure than he has so far as a Lazio coach. More questions being asked about his selection, his substitutions, his comments as well, I guess, to the media after and before these games, and his ability really to find a solution. Because I think the most alarming thing for me, on top of individual selection calls, it's the whole package of a season-long issue in taking on bigger teams or more informed teams. And Bologna, we have to count as being, a scontro diretto in this season, because they're right up there in the top four race with us.
They're above us now.
Well, they're above us now. So you can put it in that category. And if you do, the record gets even worse. And it's astoundingly bad, Lazio's form in these big matches. And a lot of the attention now is being like going back to the 6-0 against Inter. But for me, this was way worse, Vittorio. I don't know if you agree, but the Inter game, it felt almost, obviously it was terrible. It was at home, you lose 6-0. It's a disaster. But there was something of the freak result about that match, just because Inter had 7 shots and scored 6 goals. And you feel like on another day, okay, we would have lost, but it wouldn't have been quite as big a score as that. Whereas this match, it felt like 5 was not an exaggeration. That was a deserved 5-0 win against a Bologna team that in most seasons Lazio would try and beat. And that's my biggest concern with Baroni, Vittorio, is how is he just not trying anything different or managing to get a different kind of tune out of his team in these games?
Yeah, there's a lot of things to talk about. Seeing Vecino starting, I guess 85% of the Lazio fan thought, okay, we're switching to the 4-3-3. Instead, even with Vecino starting with Guendouzi and Rovella, we played a 4-2-3-1, which, we had so many listeners blaming Sarri to stick with the 4-3-3 all over again, every single game, not depending on the players, etc. But Baroni is doing pretty much the same thing, right? Vecino is not a trequartista. He's an intelligent midfielder who could help there. Instead, Baroni went with this scheme again, and the result was terrible, terrible. I don't understand why we keep playing like that. I mean, Baroni said the team was tired. Yeah, but give them a hand, right? Try something different. I don't know. I think one of the reasons why Lotito wanted Baroni was because he was a manager who could diversify a little bit, switching from scheme to scheme, tactics to tactics, etc. It looks to me that now he's focused only on this thing, only on this scheme, and that's it. Doesn't make sense, right? We are not Real Madrid. We have to scheme even for the opponent, right?
Yeah, and that's also quite different from what we saw at the start of the year. And maybe that is just a case of him coming in and taking a while to work out exactly how he wants this team to play. So it's understandable towards the start of a season that he's trying, a few different things more often than now. But at the same time, by doing so, I think he's kind of lost a bit of the unpredictability that made this Lazio team so difficult to play against at the start of the year. And that goes for both the tactics and the selection too, because I think it is more predictable what players Lazio play with now. And okay, we did get the rare spotting of Ibrahimovic on the pitch yesterday, but
7 minutes.
Well, yeah. But when you think about, you've got the option of guys like Belayan and Ibrahimovic and Prosgard, who you've decided to sign in January, and even in the middle of a crisis, you yourself are describing as a big problem physically for these players. But you've frozen out Luca Pellegrini from the squad, for example, when we're in the middle of a fullback crisis. And Bologna, I think all of their goals came from the wings yesterday. The fullbacks were a disaster defense. I mean, the whole defense was a disaster, but the amount of chances they were coming down the sides. And of course, the fullbacks are tired, and maybe sometimes you need to prove a point discipline-wise. If Pellegrini deserved it, then fine. But surely at this point, it's in the greater interest of the squad to say, okay, we kind of need you back, Luca, because Hysaj is injured and the other guys are exhausted, and it's really taking a toll because Lazio's defensive record is just awful. I mean, it's lower mid-table in Serie A. It's miles worse than all the teams around us in the table. 41 goals conceded. It's pretty bad.
Yeah, we are 12th in this personal ranking for goal conceded in Serie A. 41. We were blaming Sarri last year. Now we would be, happy celebrating Sarri's defense. And again, you mentioned the Pellegrini situation. He brought in Basic, who still didn't play a single minute. Don't tell me that we needed Basic more than Pellegrini. This is something I really don't understand. Like I don't understand the time Belayan is playing. It's more than 1 month that he's joined the club. He played Alasdair 88 minutes, 2 games, none of them starting. And he's the winter signing that played more because our big friend Ibrahimovic had played 7 minutes in Serie A and a little bit more in the Coppa Italia. And both time he came in, the game was already over. And Proskar still didn't see the pitch. So I don't know. I mean, obviously, I don't think you were expecting to see Ibrahimovic playing that much so far, but I mean, more than 7 minutes in Serie A, I think everybody was expecting that, right? So, do you think it's a message Baroni sending to the club, or there's something else?
What, the using Ibrahimovic so little, you mean?
Yeah, and not using all the other. I mean, even not using Proskar, Belayan so far, right?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I can't even fathom what he would have to complain about Belayan arriving in January, because it was exactly what we needed. Another central midfielder, take the weight off Rovella and Guendouzi a bit, and also a guy who's young, who has potential to improve, who's worked under Baroni previously, and who has lots of Serie A experience already,
Yeah.
so he can go straight in. And yet, we're still not really seeing him. Vecino, unfortunately, has come back not looking particularly sharp.
No.
Deli Bashiru's been injured for a while, which hasn't helped either. And even in the middle of all that, we're not getting to see Belayan play. And I think, the last podcast I was saying, how is Guendouzi doing this? 90, 90, 90, 90. And then finally, I think we saw the effects of that in this game, because that's the worst game Guendouzi's had for Lazio, in a Lazio shirt, for quite a while. And it, in his case, surely is down to the fact that he is being relied upon every 3 days to run about 12 kilometers in central midfield. So yeah, I don't know. I think Baroni needs this break. We all need this break. I think there was starting to be a feeling, certainly, that is Lazio's season, which up till now has been really promising. Are we on the verge of this whole thing falling apart? Because the performances recently haven't been great. We've just about managed, like you were saying in the last pod, to kind of keep things together and stay in Europe and stay in the top 4 race. And we still are right there, Vittorio. And that is good, because we still are right in the mix for all of those things.
Yep.
But he needs to find some answers, and he needs to do some soul searching in this break to work out what he is doing wrong and how he can fix it.
Before switching to this, I want to talk about the substitution Baroni made yesterday, because I think a couple doesn't make sense. He took off what was, for me, in the first half, our best player, Gustav Isaksen, and said he was tired. But now there's an international break. Who cares about Isaksen tired with the national team? And then the second substitution you make, you take off Zaccagni, who was in the second half our best player, and he said again, he was on a yellow card. I didn't want to get him suspended, etc. But the game is still on. It's not finished. And for me, you send a double message to the team with subbing Isaksen at the end of the first half and Zaccagni afterwards. Guys, it's over. We lost. We're done. Which you can do with Verona, but not for Lazio, because otherwise you get 5 goals, and this is not something you can accept easily. Before we started the pod, I asked you, what was the last time Lazio lost 2 games like Inter and Bologna, 6-0, 5-0? We don't remember. I don't think it never happened in the last 20 years or so in Serie A. So I think Baroni doesn't understand that he's not at Verona anymore, and you cannot give up a game. And we didn't have any kind of reaction, Alasdair. We entered the second half. We considered 2 stupid goals in 2 minutes, and this was it. A big team tried to react, at least to score 1. Right?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And I just before watching the Lazio game had been, sorry, just afterwards with the Juve Fiorentina game when they got beat 3-0, and I saw Del Piero was basically saying the most worrying thing for him from watching Juve was that there was no reaction to any of it. Like all the bad stuff that kept happening, they didn't react at any point. Yeah, that you just copy and paste that for the last game. I mean, it was unbelievable that it was just nothing. I mean, you mentioned Zaccagni hitting the post. You need to remember, Vittorio, that doesn't count as a shot on target. We actually didn't get, we had two in the entire game, and they both came after we were already 5-0 down. They were both right at the end, Ciauna's shot and the Rovella shot. And that does not count as a reaction. I'm sorry if you're losing 5-0 and you get something in 90th minute. It's the killer blow is obviously the 2 goals in 1 minute early in the second half. But even then, you can try and muster some pride. There has to be some sort of willingness to leave with your head held high and feel like you've given something out there from this team. I think they were lacking everything. They were lacking structure. They were lacking leadership. They were lacking any sort of creativity or ideas in attack, but any sort of organization in defense. They couldn't keep the ball. I mean, I've rarely seen a performance in all these 25 years I've been watching Lazio that I can remember where they've, almost every element of the game was so below par against an opponent that normally you would be expecting to beat, regardless of Bologna's form and so on. That's generally a game Lazio look at winning. There were very few saving graces. You hope, I think if we're looking optimistically, you would have to say the performance was so bad across the board, and there are so few excuses for any of it, that it has to be a wake-up call before the international break to say, right, the XYZ, we have to solve these problems, because Torino at home is the last chance to kind of get a bit of momentum back before that crazy run of games we've got.
Yeah, because afterwards we have Atalanta away, we have Bodo Glimt, the derby, again Bodo Glimt. So it's coming a fixture very complicated.
And Roma are 2 points behind now.
Yeah.
You have to remember, in January, the first derby, there was a 12-point gap to Roma, and now it's 2 after 2 months.
And this is the question, Alasdair, because you can see the glass half full or half empty, because we are 2 points from the Champions League, but we are 2 points from the Conference League, or worse. We're still in the Europe League quarterfinals. We have a game ahead that is not impossible, but we have to admit that the form, the performance of this team in this year from January onwards has been dreadful. I think there is a deeper form that is concerning, but we're still there. So do we have to start worrying? Do we have to keep calm? Or what is it? What's your take on this moment?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important to have that perspective, because the last thing we want is for the fans to turn against the team or to turn against Baroni, because that will have the opposite effect from what we want. The good thing is it doesn't seem like that's going to happen. There was that kind of the fans. Baroni first actually went over to the fans himself yesterday, and then the players joined and they had a chat, which can often be not a particularly nice moment for them if they're getting screamed at by angry fans. But from what they were saying, at least, it was actually messages of support they were getting. So I do hope there will be a level of that everyone can still recognize the position we're in is a much better position than we ever expected to be in by the middle of March, isn't it? I mean, we didn't think we'd be this close to the top 4 and in a European quarterfinal for sure. The problem is more the pattern, because a lot of the reason we are where we are is on the back of the work done up until Christmas, New Year, and now if we're looking at the graph, it's definitely downward trending rather than upwards. can he get that back is the question. I think we know people won't underestimate this Lazio team anymore, and people have probably worked out how to play against them better now, because at the start, I think a lot of teams were caught out by how aggressive Baroni's team were, how kind of much of an attacking free-for-all it often was. But now it's the team have worked out that they've got defensive frailties, a lot of them. Cross the ball to the back post, you'll probably score. Get to the byline and cut it into the penalty spot, and you'll probably score. We've conceded so many goals from those two situations this season. And then also with the attack not working properly, if you're going to score against Lazio, and this is the problem, then if you manage to shut down their attack, you're going to win. So there's a lot of questions to answer, that if we are going to stay where we are or be pushing towards the end of the season in these positions, he needs to find the solutions.
Do you think there's a lack of plan B in Baroni's scheme? I mean, yesterday we found out after the game that Maruzic shouldn't have played, but Nuno Tavares, that was warming up, had an injury, so he had to play because we didn't have any option. Isaiah was on the bench but wasn't fit, and Pellegrini was out of the squad. Vecino was a little bit tired. He said that Isaac and Zaccagni as well. Romagnoli wasn't 100% fit. Do you think in that situation, instead of playing again a 4-2-3-1, very offensive minded, he should have, I don't say do a catenaccio, but something more defensive. You know that you're not fresh, that you have problems. Try to do something different.
Yeah, I mean, certainly yesterday I was disappointed that he was unable to do anything to stop Bologna's threat down the wings, because it was so obvious. And yes, the fullbacks were tired and they were struggling, but they weren't really, I don't know, getting support. Maybe you can change to a 4-4-2 and drop your wingers a bit lower. I mean, I don't know, I'm not a coach, but you would have thought he'd have some sort of solution to stop the same thing happening over and over again. I mean, Juan Miranda, the fact that that guy knows how to cross a ball is not a surprise. It shouldn't be a surprise to anyone. He's been doing it for a long time. Yeah. He won the Olympics with Spain last summer doing the same thing. I mean, he had so much time and space for a couple of those goals to just cross the ball in. And we had all sorts of problems defending down there. So yeah, in-game changes, you're right, maybe plan B, but I think it's more than just having a plan B. It's being able to react actually to the game as it's going on, I think, as well, because same thing against Inter, it was the threat from the wing-backs that was the big problem in that game, and you're thinking there must be some sort of tactical way of stunting that. But yeah, he's struggled a bit there.
Can we say that we are conceding very stupid goals? I mean, yesterday we conceded 5 goals, and in all 5 of them, we made mistakes. On the first one, Lazio gave too much time and space for the Bologna player to cross. Again, the second, Maruzic forget to track back Orsolini, Romagnoli, Gila, everybody's responsible. I don't remember a clear goal from the other team that say, hey, that was great. Nothing to say about that. And this is a problem, right? And every time there's a different player who makes a mistake. You were mentioning Romagnoli, saying, he's playing really well. Well, yesterday, the Castro goal, Romagnoli was a little bit too poor on that tackle, right? So I don't know what's going on with this team.
Yeah, well, I think that's where you see the mental tiredness, probably, because it was unusual to have that kind of litany of individual errors, and I think it is a lack of concentration or focus or ability to stay in the game, to organize properly. And I think mentally they just collapsed as a team. And, that's the point I was kind of making the other day. And this is 5th away game out of 6. There obviously is an argument to be made about why this team is fatigued mentally and physically. But I don't think in this case you can excuse it at all. I was going to say, when you were talking about the different players there, has Mario Gila just had his worst game for Lazio? But actually, you can probably ask the same question about most of those players, because I think looking at the player ratings this morning, I think Zaccagni was the only one who managed to creep over a 6. I think everyone else was pretty much 5 or less, 4s and 5s.
Yeah, we didn't mention Dia. I thought he was dreadful yesterday. It was simply embarrassing. And this is not the first game. He's not playing really well at all. He's playing really bad. And maybe it's one of the reasons why Lazio is not performing so well. But Alasdair, I want to ask you this question because Nuno Tavares didn't play yesterday. Baroni said he had a little problem. But he's been called for the national team. And Baroni said, no, I think he's going, which I think it's terrible. I mean, a club like Lazio should call the Portuguese national team and said, hey, he was injured yesterday. You cannot call him. He cannot go to the national team, right? Would you be upset if he goes and play?
Yeah, well, it's hard to tell what's going on there, really, because, it is possible that he's had a tweak in the warm-up or whatever that is bad enough that he can't play that day, but isn't bad enough that it's a proper injury. I don't really know. But yeah, I mean, obviously from the club perspective, your feelings are, well, just international breaks are basically a nervy period where you're just hoping everyone comes back, hopefully in better shape than they left, if anything. Certainly not in worse. I guess it's probably a compliment to this Lazio squad that we have a lot more national players than maybe we have in previous years, but it is also not ideal in many ways that we've got, 8 or 9. I can't remember how many players are going away, but there's quite a few of them. And yeah, we just have to hope that it is a period where some of these guys at least can recuperate a bit of energy. I don't think there are that many who you'd expect to be playing 90 minutes in 2 or 3 games in this break. I really wish I had the list of international players in front of me now so I can say this with more authority. But
we have 9 players going away. And Nuno Tavares go. And
but Tavares won't play every minute for Portugal. Zaccagni and Ravella won't for Italy. Mandas won't for Greece. I can't remember who else we've got. Isaacson maybe will for Denmark. I'm not sure.
Isaacson for Denmark, Guendouzi for France. You mentioned Mandas, Adam Marusic, of course. Nuno Tavares, Dia for Senegal, and Proska for Denmark under 21.
Yeah, so probably Dia, Isaacson, and Marusic will play the most for their country.
Which is the biggest concern we have, right? Marusic, again, shouldn't have played yesterday. At least this is what Baroni said. So
also, we need Dia to just lie down for a week and just get some energy back and, find a way of turning this around, because you're right, his form has not been so hot.
No, terrible. Alasdair, this morning in Messaggero, that for people away from Italy, is the Rome newspaper, one of the most popular, said that Fabiani, our sport director, and Lotito, our owner, are not happy with Baroni, but not from yesterday defeat, but since December. And they're thinking if they made the wrong call in hiring Baroni. The reason why they're not happy are various. One, the biggest, is the 3 signings we made in winter. They hardly played. They hardly see the pitch. And while Fabiani said we made an incredible winter transfer market, well, Baroni is not saying the same thing as they're not playing. So this one, the fact that he sticks to the 4-2-3-1, the fact that he forced Lazio to sell Castrovilli, that he's not using that much Dele Bashiru. Do you think Fabiani is right, or do you still back Baroni's decision making?
Well, firstly, I think we always hear these stories, don't we? I mean, it was the same with Sarri, the same with Inzaghi. There have always been moments where we've read about disagreements between the coach and Lotito or the coach in Tare or Fabiani, whatever. I think just that can naturally end up happening. I don't think it's necessarily something to be hugely concerned about. In terms of his use of the squad, I think it's pretty unfair because I think Baroni's been way better at giving minutes to everyone in this squad, certainly than his predecessors were. Deli Bashiru, I think it was pretty clear at the start of the season he did need a bit of time to adapt. And I think as he did adapt, he was getting more game time and then he got injured. So I think it's harsh to criticize for Baroni for that kind of thing. And when it comes to other guys who are playing less now, you're talking about people like Noslin Chauna, and there's a reason they're not playing that much. They're just not playing well enough. Those first 6 months of the season, everyone got a chance. They really did. Baroni was good at that. I think what the main concern is now, which we've just been talking about again earlier, is the January signings aren't playing, and that's a bit mysterious, and the Pellegrini thing. But that's a bit different from saying, look at the squad we signed last summer, you're not using them. Yes, he has. Everyone's had a chance. So I think that's unfair.
Yeah, I think, and we said it a lot, the Lazio winter transfer market is not for a team fighting for the Champions League. You sign a player, Reda Belayan, and two promising youngsters player that probably they're not ready for this level, and that's it. I mean, yeah, you sign 3 players, but I mean, you can sign 11 players if you want, but if they are not Serie A level, they don't have to play and they don't need to play. So on this side, I back Baroni. Yes, the question mark is why Belayan is not playing. Is it because he didn't want him? Because you see Casadei what he's doing with Torino, and he's been called from to the Italian national team. So that's a big what if. But apart Belayan, I mean, Ibrahimovic hardly played with Frosinone last year. Prosgard, he was dead last in the Danish league. It shouldn't be surprising if he doesn't play a single second. Probably the Pellegrini is the most concerning question mark we have, right? Bringing Basic, who's never played and probably will never play a minute till the end of the season, and taking off Pellegrini was a strange decision. And Fabiani said it was a manager decision. We did what the manager asked, but it was clear they didn't agree on that. And even because, let's not forget, Lazio will have to buy Pellegrini this summer, and you're pretty much buying a player who is already out of the squad. So it doesn't make sense, right? You will have to buy it out on July and sell it in August, which is going to be very difficult for a player who's not playing, right? So I think Baroni has responsibility, but we have to admit, and we said that at the beginning of the season, that this squad was never a Champions League squad, right? We made a miracle in the first 6 months, and we have to be honest. If Milan and Juventus didn't have a terrible season, we wouldn't be there, right? We would be 7th, 8th position.
Yeah, we definitely can thank a bad Serie A for helping us out. Yeah, I mean, that and again, like when we were talking about perspective about Baroni's work as a whole, it's important to keep that in mind. This isn't a squad start of the season and thought they'd be pushing for European qualification.
Oops.
And I think amazed if we finish in the top 4 really with this squad and this recent form. But what I really don't want is for the domestic season to unravel. I'm fine with them really making a big go for it in the Europa League, but it's tight enough in that table that Lazio could tumble all the way down to 9th place quite quickly, and that's not what we want, because I think for what this squad did in the first half of this season, they will feel like they deserve to be at least in the top 6, and I think that would be a good finish. Finishing in the top 6 this season, I think would be a good result on the back of also having European run and the huge squad turnover, a new coach, everything else. So Yeah, like I say, I think that Baroni just needs to spend this international break. For me, it's almost as important that he's getting a rest as everyone else, because it gives him time to actually stop and reflect a little bit. Because when we're talking about all these different things he can do, it's probably quite difficult for him when there's games coming up and very limited training sessions. We have to remember between all these games, because you need to let the players have days off here and there. But this break will at least give him a chance to reflect on what's worked, what hasn't worked, and how he can try and change things ahead of this huge run of games.
Yeah, I'm pessimistic because it's something we already saw in the past, right? Lazio had very good start of the season, maybe arriving in December second, third place, and then simply collapsing in the last 6 months of the season and finish out of the Champions League, but even out of the top six. I fear this could happen again this season. I'm watching these players not performing anymore like beginning of the season. Dia, Noslin has been dreadful. Chana is a big question mark. So yeah, it's strange because we're still there, 2 points from Bologna, but the other teams are running, and we look like we are struggling. And I know you said go full on the Europe League, but playing like this, it's gonna be very difficult. Manchester United yesterday won a good game. Tottenham lost as usual, but if we play like this, I think Tottenham has a bigger. Well, we have to. First of all, we have to reach
Yeah,
the.
yeah.
I mean,
that's no certainty, Vittorio.
absolutely not.
Yeah, I know. It's going to be difficult. All of it is going to be difficult. But look, I mean, the way Roma are going at the moment is a concern. Fiorentina's result yesterday could easily be one that lifts them out of their little crisis and gets them going again. There are a lot of teams around us now who don't have these midweek games. Only, I guess, Milan have the Coppa Italia semis against Inter, but otherwise, Roma are out of Europe, Atalanta, Juve out of Europe. Fiorentina are the only other team who still have this midweek distraction, if you like, which is going to make this run-in so difficult. And the concerning thing for me is really the fixtures, because there are so many of these big games, and big games have just been the biggest issue. And Atalanta and Roma is a chance for Baroni to properly plan for those games and try and figure out a way of actually coming away with some victories. Because also the table is so tight that there is a decent chance we end up level on points with someone. And that costs you a place now. Remember, with the head-to-head being the tiebreaker in Serie A, that means you drop down a spot if you've lost those games. So, high time they performed in a big match.
Yeah, can we say the international break this time arrived at the perfect moment for us? Even though we have a lot of players away, but the chance of recovering Tati Castigliano, we missed him badly yesterday. Even Dele Bashiro and Isai are important to have back, especially seeing that Pellegrini is still out of the squad. So, yeah, Alasdair, let's hope that we have good news from the medical test going through this week more than the training. And yeah, Alasdair, let's wrap it up here on a good tone, hoping Tati is going to be back. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Thanks, Alasdair, for joining us. We're probably going to do a special episode next week during the international break. So keep an eye on us. And thanks again to our Patreon fans. Ciao, Alasdair.
Cheers.